William Garrett had passed this sign approximately 400 times in his life. He had passed it in the back seat of his father's Ford when he was small, watching it appear and disappear and meaning nothing to him except that they were almost home. He had passed it on the school bus. He had passed it at 17 in his friend's Civic, doing 65 with the windows down in August, feeling the particular velocity of a boy about to become something, not knowing yet what. He had passed it at 22, driving away, his whole life in the back of a rented truck, the sign shrinking in the passenger side mirror until it was gone. He had not passed it in 7 years. He passed it now at 6:15 on a Tuesday evening in September, in a car he had not owned long enough to feel comfortable in, with a cardboard box on the passenger seat containing the things from his desk at the firm in Philadelphia that were personal enough to take and not personal enough to matter, and the particular expression of a man who has made a decision that was not so much chosen as arrived at, the way exhaustion arrives, gradually and then all at once. His mother needed him. This was the sentence. This was the whole of the justification, the lever that had moved him. His mother, 68 years old, recently recovered from a fall that had been worse than initially reported, alone in the house on Sycamore Circle where he had grown up, too proud to ask him directly but not too proud to mention the fall 3 times in 2 weeks to his Aunt Ruth, who was not too proud to ask him directly. He had given notice on his apartment. He had given notice at the firm, which had been more gracious about it than he had expected, offering a leave of absence rather than a resignation, which he had accepted because accepting felt better than refusing, even though he suspected he would not go back. He had driven 4 hours from Philadelphia with a cardboard box, and the particular lightness of a man who has released something large and is not sure yet whether it was a burden or a ballast. He turned onto Sycamore Circle. The street was exactly as he had left it, which was either comforting or terrible depending on the day. He pulled into the driveway of his mother's house, the white colonial with the green shutters, the maple in the front yard that was just beginning its September turn, the porch his father had repainted every 3 years and which needed painting now, which was a thing William noticed in the specific way of a man who had been a boy on this porch and knew its every condition. And he sat in the car for a moment with the engine running. He looked at the house across the street. The house across the street was a pale yellow Craftsman with a covered porch and a detached garage. It had been the Aldrich house for as long as William could remember. For all of his childhood and adolescence, it had meant the Aldriches, Dennis and Carol, and their 2 kids, one of whom was the reason William had spent more of his childhood on this street than he might otherwise have. The reason was named James. James Aldrich, who was the smartest person William had ever known at age 12, and the funniest person he had known at 15, and the most confusing presence in his life from 16 onward. A confusion that had taken him the better part of his 20s to properly understand and even longer to properly name. The pale yellow house had a light on in the front room. It had a truck in the driveway he didn't recognize, a gray pickup, a few years old with a university parking sticker on the rear window. William turned off the engine. He got out of the car. He stood in the driveway of his mother's house on Sycamore Circle in Dunmore, Pennsylvania, which he had sworn at 22 he was leaving for good, and he looked at the pale yellow house across the street. And he felt something he had not felt in 7 years. A specific kind of knowing, the knowledge that comes before thought, that operates in the body rather than the mind. He thought, that's James's truck. He thought, James Aldrich is back. He picked up the cardboard box and went inside to see his mother. I thought Eleanor Garrett was 71 years old, not 68, as she had apparently reported to her sister Ruth, which was a revision William chose not to contest. And she was, as she had always been, a small, bright-eyed woman who gave the impression of someone who had decided early that life was interesting and had not found sufficient evidence to revise this opinion. She had broken her wrist in the fall, not her hip as Ruth had implied, and the wrist was healing well, but the process of managing the house alone with a compromised right hand had been genuinely difficult. And she received William's arrival with the particular combination of relief and pride that parents have perfected over centuries. Gratitude expressed as practicality, love expressed as dinner. She fed him. She showed him his room, which was also her sewing room now and contained a daybed and approximately 40 yards of fabric, and the ghost of every bedroom it had previously been, in layers. She did not mention the house across the street. William did not mention it either. He put the cardboard box in the closet and lay on the daybed in the dark and listened to Sycamore Circle. The specific sounds of a street he had grown up on, the particular acoustics of this neighborhood in the early evening, the Hendersons' dog 2 doors down, the Garcia's kids somewhere in the middle distance, the way the September wind moved through the maple out front in a way that was entirely specific to this tree on this street, and was the same sound it had been making for 30 years. He had hated this sound at 22. He lay in the dark and listened to it and did not know yet what he felt about it. He saw James the next morning, not by arrangement, not through any particular intention on either of their parts. William came out at 8 o'clock with a mug of coffee, intending to sit on the porch and adjust to the fact of being here, and James was coming down the steps of the pale yellow house across the street at the same moment with a bag over one shoulder and keys in his hand, and they saw each other across the width of Sycamore Circle in the September morning light. 7 years. James Aldrich at 33 looked like James Aldrich at 26 had been threatening to. The same dark eyes, the same mobile, expressive face that had always communicated too much for its own good, but settled now, grown into itself. The face of a man who had been somewhere and come back from it carrying some knowledge of who he was. He was thinner than William remembered. Or maybe the same. It was hard to say, through 7 years in a street's width. He stopped when he saw William. William stopped too, though he was on his own porch and stopping was not particularly meaningful on a porch. They looked at each other. Then James raised his hand. A wave, easy, unhurried, the gesture of a man who had decided in the split second available to him to take the uncomplicated approach. William raised his mug. James smiled. Not his full smile, a partial one, the kind that was still feeling the situation out. He came down the rest of his steps and across the street with the particular quality of movement William remembered and had occasionally, in the 7 years, thought about. The quality of someone who moved as though the world were generally a reasonable place and his presence in it was a settled matter. "Will," he said from the bottom of the porch steps. "James," William said. A pause. The September morning sat between them, mild and golden, aware of itself. "You're back," James said. Not an accusation, just the acknowledgement of a fact that was surprising enough to require acknowledgement. "So are you," William said. James looked at the street, at the houses, at the maple tree. The same expression William suspected was on his own face. The expression of someone visiting something they thought they'd left, and finding it more complicated than expected. "My father," James said. "He had a stroke in July. He's at Mercy Memorial. My mother needed—" He stopped. "I'm at the university, teaching. 1-year appointment starting this semester." He paused. "I didn't plan to be here." "Neither did I. Your mother's hand?" "Wrist, it's healing." William looked at him. "How's your father?" "Better, slow." James's jaw moved. "It was bad for a while." "I'm sorry." "Yeah." He looked up from the street. "It's good to see you, Will." William looked at him. At the face he had known his whole life and lost for 7 years, which was both familiar and strange in the way of all returned things, everything that is known and unknown at once. "Come in," William said. "I'll make more coffee." James looked at the bag on his shoulder, at his keys. "I have a 9 o'clock, he said. "Tomorrow morning?" William said. "A beat." "Yeah," James said. "All right." He walked back across the street. William stood on the porch until he heard the truck start, and then he went inside and stood in his mother's kitchen with his coffee cup and his chest and all the specific, ungovernable information that 7 years had not done anything useful with. James Aldrich, back on Sycamore Circle, after everything. He sat down at the kitchen table. He had been in Dunmore for 14 hours. Over coffee the next morning, they were careful. This was visible and mutual. The carefulness, a shared project that neither of them had needed to propose because they both arrived at it simultaneously, by instinct. The instinct of two people who know exactly where the unmarked ground is and have independent reasons not to step in it. They talked about Philadelphia, where William had been. They talked about Pittsburgh, where James had spent 3 years before the 1-year appointment at Dunmore University brought him back. They talked about the work. William's 7 years at a mid-sized corporate law firm, which he described with the careful neutrality of someone describing a place they have left and have not yet finished having feelings about. James's position in the history department, the courses, the research he was working on. A book about small American industrial towns in the post-war period that was, William noted without saying so, Precisely the kind of book a man who had grown up in Dunmore and left Dunmore and come back to Dunmore would write. They did not talk about why they had left. They did not talk about the summer before William left. The last summer. The summer they were both 22. The summer that existed in William's memory as a specific region of feeling that he had spent 7 years navigating around. The way you navigate around a room you have stopped going into without quite deciding to. They did not talk about the last night of that summer. The porch of the Aldrich house, the August heat, the particular quality of dark on Sycamore Circle when the streetlights were all on, and the rest of the world was asleep. The things said and not said. The way James had looked at him when William said, "I have to go," meaning Philadelphia, meaning the job, meaning the life he had built as a reason to be somewhere else, and the way James had nodded in a manner that suggested he understood entirely what was happening and had decided to accept it. They did not talk about any of this. They talked about coffee and the university and the best route to Mercy Memorial if you were trying to avoid the school traffic on Route 9 in the mornings. And it was fine. It was genuinely fine. Warm even. The coffee and the conversation had warmth in it. The warmth of two people who have known each other their whole lives and find the knowing still present and still comfortable, even after 7 years and significant absence. That was the particular quality of growing up with someone. You could not fully lose them. They were in you the way the street was in you, the way the maple tree was in you, as a reference point for everything that came after. But underneath the warmth, both of them were managing. William could feel his own management as a physical thing, a slight tension in his chest that was not quite discomfort and not quite anticipation, but was the feeling of keeping something from moving too quickly towards something else. He watched himself do it. This was the lawyer in him, maybe, or just the particular architecture of who he was. The capacity to observe himself from a slight remove, to note what was happening and choose his response to it with more deliberation than most people could manage. James was harder to read. He had always been harder to read, despite the mobile, communicative face. There was something underneath the expressiveness that was private, that retreated when examined, that James had been protecting since they were teenagers for reasons William had taken a long time to understand and no longer needed explained. Oh, September moved into October. They fell into something, not a plan. It was not structured enough to be a plan, but it had a rhythm to it. Coffee most mornings, on one porch or the other, depending on who was up first and who had time. Occasional evenings, dinner at the Garrett house, where Eleanor was both a genuinely good cook and a genuinely delighted audience for James, whom she had always liked, who had always been easy with parents in the way that some people are easy with parents, who managed the complicated terrain of a mother who was watching her son for signs of happiness with the graceful patience of someone who understood the stakes. They walked the neighborhood in the evenings sometimes, the way the neighborhood invited walking. Sycamore Circle was a dead end, which meant its traffic was only its own. And in the evenings, the quality of the street was one of the things William had not admitted missing. The particular piece of a street that went nowhere and was content about it. They talked. The conversations got easier, then deeper. Not to the place where the uncrossed ground was, but further than the surface, into the territory of two men in their early 30s who had made choices and were living in the consequences of those choices and had not yet found someone who fully understood the choices to talk to. James's book was about towns like Dunmore, the industrial decline, the demographic shift, the specific complex identity of places that had once known what they were, and then stopped knowing and were still, decades later, working out the answer. He talked about it with the particular animacy that he always had when something mattered to him, the way his hands moved, the way his voice changed register when he hit something real. The thing nobody says, James told him one evening, on the Garrett porch with the October chill beginning its serious work, is that people who leave these towns carry them. You can't leave Dunmore behind. It's in the way you think about work and family and what a neighborhood owes you and what you owe it. It's in your bones whether you like it or not. William looked at the street. Some things you leave behind, he said. James looked at him. Do you? He said. Not a question. A pause. Some things, William said again, but more quietly. And the qualification landed between them with a weight that neither of them addressed directly, the way they addressed nothing directly, the way they had agreed, without discussing it, to manage. On the third Saturday in October, they drove to Eldridge Lake. This was James's suggestion, offered casually over coffee on a morning when William's mother had gone to her sister Ruth's, and the house was quiet, and James had arrived with 2 cups from the bakery on Main Street and the expression of someone who had a thing in mind. Eldridge Lake was 9 miles out of Dunmore, a reservoir built in the 40s that served as the town's water supply and, less officially, as the primary swimming and fishing destination for several generations of Dunmore kids. There was a concrete boat launch at the north end that doubled as a fishing platform, and a gravel path along the east bank, and a picnic area with wooden tables that were empty now in October, and the water that was, at this time of year, a deep, unambiguous blue that had the quality of something that knew exactly what it was. They had come here every summer of their childhood. Dozens of times, maybe hundreds. It was not the kind of thing you counted. You came because it was the place to come on a hot day when Sycamore Circle felt too small, and the lake was large enough to swim in, and the afternoons were long enough to be used fully. You rode your bikes there until you were old enough to drive, and then you drove there. And the first time you drove there yourself was one of the particular satisfactions of becoming 16. The last time they had come here was the summer they were 22. William parked at the north end and they got out and stood at the boat launch with the lake before them and October doing its full work on the trees along the eastern bank. The maple and oak gone orange and red in the way of a season that knows it is ending and has decided to make something of that. "I didn't plan to come back," James said. He was looking at the lake, his hands in his jacket pockets, the wind off the water moving his hair. "I know," William said, "but I'm here, and it's—" He stopped. He looked at the water. "It's not what I expected." "What did you expect?" James was quiet for a moment. "I expected it to feel like failing," he said. William looked at him. "Coming back to a place you left," James continued. "I expected it to feel like defeat, like admitting something." He paused. "It doesn't feel like that." "What does it feel like?" James turned and looked at him. The full look, the one he didn't always use, the one that was not managing anything. "Like finding something I thought I'd lost," he said. The October wind came off the lake. William looked at him. At the face that was both 33 and 12 and 22 and all the ages in between. The face of a person who had been part of his life's geography since before he knew what his life's geography was. He thought, "Say it. This is the moment. You are here, at this lake, in October, with no one else for miles, and this is the moment." He thought, "If I say it and I'm wrong." He thought, "If I say it and I'm right." "James," he said. "Will," James said at the same time. They both stopped. A beat. James smiled, the full one this time. "You first," he said, and William opened his mouth and the wind came up hard off the lake, the kind of wind that required physical response, both of them turning their faces from it and stepping back from the water's edge. And by the time the gust passed and they had both righted themselves, the moment had shifted into a slightly different configuration, slightly more ordinary, slightly less held breath. And the thing William had been about to say was still there, but the angle of it had changed and he said instead, "I'm glad you're back." James looked at him. "Yeah," James said. Quiet. A different weight than the word usually carried. They walked the gravel path along the east bank, in the October light, in the way of two people who have said something and also not said something. And the lake was very blue and the trees were going to fire, and the town of Dunmore was 9 miles away waiting for them with its memories and its complications. On the drive back, James said, without looking at him, "My 9 o'clock on Fridays got canceled. Starting next week." William understood this to mean, "I have Friday mornings free." He understood it was an offering. "I make good French toast," he said. "I know you do," James said. "You made it every Saturday for 3 summers." "4 summers," William said. James looked at him then. 4 summers, he agreed. The truck moved through the October evening toward Sycamore Circle, and neither of them said what 4 summers meant, or why William had remembered the correct number, or what the distinction between 3 and 4 summers revealed about the particular catalog of things he had been keeping without meaning to. They did not need to say it. That was part of the problem. November came to Dunmore with a severity that felt personal, not unusual. November in Pennsylvania had always had this quality. A cold that was not yet winter but was fully done with autumn. A gray that settled over the Pocono foothills and the river valley and the streets of Dunmore with the insistence of something that had arrived and intended to stay. The leaves came off the maple in the front yard in 3 days in early November, and then the tree was bare and the sky was the particular color of pewter that would be the sky's primary offering until April. William's mother improved steadily, which was the good news. The wrist was fully mobile again. She was cooking her own meals, managing the house, attending her book club and her church committee with the energy of a woman for whom activity was a biological requirement. She was, in the direct way of mothers who have been watching their children for 30 years, quietly watching William. "You seem better," she said one morning over breakfast. "I wasn't bad before," William said. "Will," she said, with the tone she used for statements that were complete by themselves. He looked at his coffee. "I feel—" He tried to find the true word. "I feel more like myself than I did in Philadelphia." He said this as though it were a small thing. It was not a small thing. His mother nodded. She had the look of a woman who could say more and was choosing not to. James's father improved and then did not improve. The stroke had taken more than they initially understood. There was a quality to Dennis Aldrich now, a flatness, that was not the Dennis Aldrich James had described in the years before. The complicated, difficult, ultimately loving father who had been a presence in James's life in the way of fathers who are very present and not always easy. He was there, and he was attended to, and he was receiving the best care Mercy Memorial could provide. And the person who was most changed by it was Carol Aldrich, James's mother, who had been married to Dennis for 41 years and who was now managing, daily, the particular grief of caring for someone who is present but altered. James went to the hospital every day. He drove the 9-minute route to Mercy Memorial and sat with his father and helped his mother manage the appointments and the paperwork and the specific bureaucratic weight of serious illness. And he came home in the evenings with the particular exhaustion of a man doing several jobs at once and doing all of them fully. William saw this. He saw it in the way James moved in the mornings before the hospital visits. The set of his shoulders, the extra coffee, the moments on the porch where he was looking at something William couldn't see. He saw it, the way you see things in people you've known long enough to have a baseline for. The deviation from the ordinary self, the extra weight that today is carrying. He brought dinner to the Aldrich house twice. He sat with James on the yellow porch on evenings when James needed to be somewhere that was not his mother's kitchen or the hospital, somewhere with a different quality of air. He was in the way he had always been with James since they were children, present, available, quietly, consistently there, James noticed. William knew he noticed. Neither of them addressed it. The thing happened on a Thursday evening in mid-November. William was working at the dining room table. He had taken on some freelance contract review, partly to maintain the habit of work and partly because the hours needed filling. And he heard the sound of the Aldrich's front door, and then James's steps on the porch and then nothing. And he looked out the window. James was sitting on the front steps of the yellow house in his coat. Not doing anything, not on his phone. Just sitting on the steps in the November dark with his elbows on his knees and his hands loose in front of him and his head down in the posture of a man who has run out of the particular energy required for appearing fine. William put on his coat. He crossed the street. He sat down beside James on the steps. He did not ask what was wrong. He knew what was wrong. He sat beside him in the cold and waited. After a while, James said, "He didn't know me today. For about an hour in the afternoon. He was very clear otherwise. He knew my mother. He asked about the house, and then for an hour he looked at me and didn't know who I was." He paused. "He came back. He knew me again by the time I left." Another pause. "But now I know it can happen." William said nothing for a moment. "I know," he said. They sat in the November cold on the porch steps of the house where James had grown up, on the street where both of them had grown up, which they had both sworn they would leave and had left and had come back to for reasons that were about other people, and which were, increasingly, about each other. And the neighborhood was quiet around them, and the stars were out over the Pennsylvania hills, and the temperature was dropping. "I'm sorry, James," William said. James looked at him. In the porch light, his face was open in a way it rarely was outside of those careful, watched moments. The management was down. He looked tired and sad and something else. Something that was not tiredness and not sadness, but which was present, immediate, directed at William with the specificity of something that had been kept in a particular place and had gotten out. "Can I say something?" James said. "Yes," William said. "I've been—" James stopped. He looked at his hands. "I've been careful, this fall, since we've been back here at the same time. I know what I'm doing, Will. I'm not managing this without knowing I'm managing it." William was very still. "I've been careful because the last time I wasn't careful." James stopped again. He turned to look at William directly, in the porch light. in the November dark. "You left," he said. There it was. The sentence. The last summer, the porch, the August night, and I have to go, and James nodding in the way that meant I understand and meant something else entirely that William had understood and chosen not to respond to, and had driven away from the next morning and not come back for 7 years. "I know," William said. His voice was careful. "You left," James said again, not with accusation. He was not an accusatory person, but with the particular clarity of someone who has been holding a fact for a long time and is now simply setting it on the table between them so it can be seen. "And I didn't ask you not to. I know that. I know what I did. I let you leave because it seemed like the easier thing and because I was—" His jaw was tight. "I was afraid. Of the same thing you were afraid of, I think." William looked at him. "What do you think I was afraid of?" he asked. Quiet. The question was real. James looked at the street. "That it was real," he said. That what the whole 4 summers were, was real. And that real meant we had to do something about it. And doing something about it meant, here, Dunmore, the street, your parents knowing, my parents knowing. The whole thing of it." He paused. "It was easier to call it friendship and let you leave." William was quiet for a long moment. "I wasn't afraid it was real," he said. James looked at him. "I knew it was real," William said. "I was afraid that you didn't know. Or that you knew and didn't. That I was the only one who—" He stopped. He looked at the street. "I left because staying and being wrong seemed worse than leaving." The November night settled around them. "You weren't wrong," James said. 2 words. The weight of 7 years. William looked at him. They were very close. The steps were not wide. 2 men on porch steps in coats in November. The margin between them had always been small, and tonight it was smaller. The 4 inches or less of 2 people who have arrived at the edge of something and are standing at it fully. "James," William said. "I know," James said. I need to say, Will." James's voice had changed. The lower, more careful quality. The voice of someone about to do something from which there is no return. "I have been on this street for 4 months, and every morning when I see you, I think the same thing I thought every morning when we were 22 on this street. And I am done not saying it." The porch light flickered once, the particular flicker of a bulb at the end of its life. "Then say it," William said. The same words he had said in a different autumn in a different city. The echo of them arriving here like something that had been traveling and had finally reached its destination. James opened his mouth. Carol Aldrich's voice came through the front door. "James, the hospital called." Both of them went still. "James, they need us to come in. Your father, it's all right. They said it's all right. He's stable. But they want us there." James was already up. His hand was on the door. He looked back at William, and his face had the expression of a man in the specific, unbearable position of being asked to be in 2 places and knowing exactly which one he has to choose. "Go," William said. Immediately, without hesitation. "I'll be here." James looked at him. "I'll be right here," William said. "Go." James went inside. William heard the voices inside, the front door, the truck starting. He sat on the steps in the November cold and watched the gray pickup back out of the driveway and turn toward Mercy Memorial, the taillights going red at the corner and then gone. He sat on the steps for a long time. You weren't wrong. He sat in the cold with those 3 words and the November dark and the bare trees on Sycamore Circle. And he thought about 4 summers, and about leaving, and about what it had cost, and about the porch light that was still flickering above him, with the persistence of something that had not yet decided what to do. At 11:15 his phone buzzed. A text from James. "He's okay. Elevated BP. They wanted to monitor. Home by midnight. I'm sorry." William typed back. "Don't be. Tell your mother I said hello. I'll see you in the morning." A long pause. Then, "Will, I'm going to finish what I started saying. In the morning. I need you to know I'm going to finish it." William looked at his phone in the November dark. He typed. "I know. I'll be on the porch." He went inside. He did not sleep until James's truck was back in the driveway across the street and the light in the Aldrich kitchen was off. Then he slept deeply, the sleep of a man who is about to be told something he has needed to hear for 7 years and who has, finally, stopped being afraid to receive it. Act 4. The porch in the morning, the winter coming. He was on the porch at 7. The morning was cold, genuinely, unarguably cold. The first morning of the season with ice on the cars and the breath visible from the moment you stepped out. The kind of morning that required a real coat and made no apologies for it. William had the real coat and the coffee and the particular stillness of a man who has prepared himself for something by the simple act of deciding to be ready. He did not wait long. James came out of the pale yellow house at 7:10, in his coat with no bag. Not going anywhere this morning, it appeared, which was itself information. He came down the steps and across the street with the quality of movement that William had always associated with him when he was moving towards something decided, unhurried, direct, without the ambient uncertainty of motion that is still negotiating with itself. He came up William's porch steps. William poured him coffee. They sat. The street was quiet in the cold. The maples were bare. The Hendersons' car was frosted over and would require attention before anyone went anywhere. The sky was the particular white of a Pennsylvania November morning that had not yet decided whether to stay white or become something worse. "How's your father?" William said. "Stable. Better than last night?" James held the coffee cup in both hands. "My mother was good. She's stronger than I've been giving her credit for." "She's always been strong." "Yeah." He looked at the street. "She told me last night, in the waiting room. She said, 'James, stop worrying about us. Start worrying about yourself.'" He said it with a particular tone that was not quite amusement and not quite grief. "She's right," William said. "I know she is." A pause. "Last night," James said. "You don't have to start there," William said. "I want to start there, because that's where I left off." James turned slightly on the step to face him, the way he had always done when he was saying something that required full attention, a physical reorientation toward what mattered. I was saying that I've been careful this fall because the last time I wasn't, you left. And I wasn't blaming you for leaving. I want to be clear about that. I know you weren't. I was as responsible as you were. More, maybe." He paused. "Because I knew. I knew the whole time, through 4 summers, through everything. I knew what it was. And I kept it." He stopped. He looked at his hands on the cup. "I kept it in the space between us where it didn't have to be addressed. Because it was comfortable there. Because if it stayed in that space, we could both pretend it was just friendship," William said. "Yes." "Which it was also. It was also that." He looked up. "Will, we were best friends for 10 years. That was real. All of it was real. I don't want to reduce it to just the part that was. I don't want to make it smaller than it was." "I don't either," William said. "But there was more than friendship," James said. "And we both knew it. And neither of us said it. And then you left, and I." He set the coffee cup down. "I went to Pittsburgh, and I built a life there. A good life. I had someone for a while. You don't have to. No, I want to say it. I had someone for 2 years. He was a good man. He's a good man. It didn't work, but not because of anything wrong with him. It didn't work because I am." He stopped. He looked at William with the expression that was not managing anything. "I am still, after 7 years, most myself when I'm talking to you. That is the true sentence. That's the thing that didn't resolve, no matter what I did with the time." William looked at him. The morning light lay cold and clear on Sycamore Circle. A car started somewhere, someone warming up for the commute. The ice on the maple branches caught the early sun and made brief small lights. "James," William said. His voice had the quality it had on the porch of the Aldrich house last night, before the phone call, the voice of arriving. "I'm not done," James said. "Sorry. There's something I've been trying to find the right way to say for about." He almost smiled. "For about 11 years, if we're being honest." "We're being honest," William said. "Then I'll just say it without the right way." James looked at him. Directly. The full look. The one from the lake. The one from last night. "I love you, Will. I have loved you since we were 22 years old on this street, and probably before that if I'm being fair about the timeline. I loved you when you left, and I loved you in Pittsburgh, and I loved you when I got the 1-year appointment and realized it meant coming back here, which was terrifying for about 12 reasons, and this was the biggest one." He paused. He let it sit. "I'm not asking you to. I'm not putting conditions on this. I am done not saying it. Whatever it means for you, whatever you... James, William said. James stopped. I drove from Philadelphia, William said. Not because of my mother's wrist. James looked at him. I mean, her wrist is real and I was needed, and I'm glad I came for her. He paused. But when Aunt Ruth called and said your mother needs you, the first thing I felt was... It was an obligation. It was... He searched for the honest word. Relief, he said. I felt relief. Because I had been looking for a reason that wasn't about. I needed a reason that wasn't just, I want to go back because James Aldrich might still be on that street. James was very still. You knew I was here? He said. My mother mentioned it. 3 weeks before I gave notice. William looked at his hands. At the coffee cup. At the street. I told myself it was coincidence. I told myself the two things weren't related. Are they related? William looked at him. James? I got in my car in Philadelphia and drove 4 hours with a cardboard box of desk things, and the first thing I did when I turned onto Sycamore Circle, before I turned off the engine, before I went in to see my mother, was look across the street. A beat. I was looking for your truck, William said. James was looking at him with an expression that William would carry for a long time. Not as a memory of something dramatic, but as a memory of something true. The expression of a man receiving confirmation of something he had not quite let himself believe. The particular vulnerability of having been known correctly after a long time of wondering. Will, he said. Quiet. I know, William said. I know we have. There's history here. And we're both here for other people. And this is Sycamore Circle in November, which is... He almost laughed. Not where I imagined having this conversation. Where did you imagine having it? William looked at him. I didn't let myself imagine it. What does that mean? It means I was afraid. He said it plainly. No management. I have been afraid of this specific thing for 11 years. Afraid I was wrong about what it was. Afraid I wasn't wrong and it would cost something I wasn't willing to pay. Afraid, he stopped. I am still afraid, he said. I want you to know that. I'm saying this afraid. James looked at him for a long moment. Me too, he said. I am saying this afraid. They were very close on the porch. The 4 inches or less of two people who have been at the edge of something for a long time and have arrived finally at the last inch of it. What happens now? William said. The question was real. I don't know exactly, James said. I'm here until May. How long are you here? I don't know. He paused. I don't think I'm going back to Philadelphia. Not to what I was doing there. He looked at the street. I've been thinking about... There's a need here for a public interest practice. I've been talking to the County Bar Association. He said it almost tentatively, the way you say something that is a plan but that you haven't said aloud yet because saying it aloud makes it real. I don't know if I'm staying, but I'm not leaving the way I left before. James was quiet for a moment. Before you left, he said. The last summer. The night on the Aldrich porch. He paused. I almost asked you to stay. Why didn't you? Because you had something to go to. A pause. And I was afraid that if I asked and you still left, it would mean the answer was no. It wouldn't have meant that, William said. I know that now. James looked at him. What would have happened if I'd asked? William held his coffee cup. He looked at the street, at the bare maple, at the white sky, at the pale yellow house across the way, at Sycamore Circle in November, which was the most familiar geography in his life, and which he had spent 7 years at a distance from, and which was, he understood now, not a place he had left, but a place he had been carrying. The way James had said in the workshop about Dunmore, in your bones, whether you like it or not. I would have stayed, he said. James looked at him. James. William turned to face him fully on the steps, in the cold, in the morning light. I would have stayed. The word stayed sat in the cold air between them. James set down his coffee cup. He reached out and put his hand on William's arm. Not a dramatic gesture, not a sweep or a claim. The simple, deliberate reach of a person touching something they have been careful not to touch for a long time, and are done being careful about. William looked at his hand on his arm. He put his own hand over it. The morning after I left, William said, I was on 81 South, halfway to Philadelphia. I had the radio on. I don't remember what was playing, and I thought... He stopped. He looked at James. I thought, go back, turn around, go back and say it. Why didn't you? I kept driving, William said. I told myself I'd call. I told myself. I found reasons to keep going and I used them. 7 years of reasons, James said. Not bitterly. Honestly. Yes. I made my own, James said. I want to be fair. I could have called. I could have. I kept the reasons too. A pause. We were both foolish, William said. We were both afraid, James said. That's different. Is it? James looked at him. His hand still on William's arm, William's hand over his. The cold morning around them and the street they grew up on quiet in the November stillness. I think, James said, that fear and foolishness in this area are more or less indistinguishable. He paused. And I think, at 33, on this porch in November, I am done letting them look the same. William looked at him. James, he said. His voice had the quality that came before the final word, the sentence before the sentence, the breath before the breath. I know, James said, the same quality in his voice, the same readiness. I need to... I know, James said again. And then Mrs. Patricia Henderson's car alarm went off across the street, which was not the car alarm announcing a theft, but the car alarm announcing that Patricia Henderson had touched her key fob at the wrong angle while trying to clear the ice from her windshield, as she had done approximately 4 times a winter for as long as William could remember. And the noise was enormous and particular and entirely Dunmore, and James looked at William, and William looked at James, and both of them, despite everything, started laughing. The kind of laughing that is also something else. The kind that comes from the specific impossibility of certain moments. The way the world inserts itself into them with such cheerful indifference. The way nothing waits for the right time because there is no right time, there is only the time you have and what you do with it. The car alarm stopped. Patricia Henderson waved from her driveway. Not at them specifically, just at the general neighborhood. The wave of a woman apologizing to the air. They were still laughing, diminishing now. The laughter settling into the morning. James was looking at William with an expression that was the most unguarded thing William had ever seen on his face. And William thought, there it is. There is the face I have been cataloging for 20 years without knowing what I was keeping it for. Tonight, James said, come to dinner. My mother's cooking. She always makes too much and I want... He paused. I want you to be there. I'll be there, William said. James stood. He picked up his coffee cup. He looked at William from the step above him. One more thing, he said. Yes, William said. I'm glad we came back. He went down the steps and across the street and up the steps of the pale yellow house. And William sat on the porch in the November cold with his coffee and the morning, and everything that had almost been said and everything that was going to be said tonight, and felt, for the first time in 7 years, that he was in the right place. He sat on the porch until the sun was fully up over the Pennsylvania hills, and Sycamore Circle was awake, and the day had started, and his mother called from inside to ask if he wanted eggs. He went inside. He said yes to the eggs. He thought about tonight. The Aldrich kitchen smelled like his childhood. This was the first thing. The smell of it, which was Carol Aldrich's particular combination of garlic and rosemary and something sweet underneath, probably the apple cake she made in November, and the warm smell of the house itself, a house that had been lived in by the same family for 40 years and had the quality of all such houses. Layered, specific, the accumulation of countless ordinary evenings. William had been in this kitchen hundreds of times. He had eaten at this table, the round oak table in the corner where Carol was now setting plates with the efficiency of a woman who had cooked for a family for 4 decades and did not require assistance, probably 100 times in his childhood and adolescence, and had not been in it for 7 years. The not being in it had a texture to it, standing here now, the way absence has texture when you return to the place of it. Dennis Aldrich was at the table. He was thinner than William remembered. He moved with a slowness that was new, and was the stroke's residue, the way the body keeps an account of what has happened to it. But he looked at William when he came in, and his eyes had recognition in them, and he said, "Will Garrett, Eleanor's boy." In the voice of a man who had known William's name since William was 6 years old and intended to go on knowing it. "Mr. Aldrich," William said, "good to see you." "Sit down," Dennis said. "You're too tall for standing in doorways." William sat. Carol fed them. The rosemary chicken, the apple cake, the particular abundance of a woman expressing care in the form of food. And the dinner had an ease to it that surprised William, or maybe didn't surprise him, maybe was entirely consistent with what this street had always been. the place where things were simple in the way of things that are known, where the context of a lifetime of shared neighborhood meant that the ordinary was genuinely comfortable. James was across the table. He talked with his father about the university, about the book. Dennis had opinions about the decline of Pennsylvania industry that were emphatic and not entirely wrong. And the conversation was warm and alive in the way of families that love each other and have been recently reminded that love is not permanent in its circumstances, only in its fact. After dinner, Dennis tired and was helped to bed by Carol with the matter-of-fact tenderness of a woman who had been doing this since July and had found her own way to it. James and William cleaned up, without discussion, the way they had cleaned up after dinner in this kitchen 20 years ago when Dennis and Carol went to watch television, and the two of them stayed in the kitchen doing dishes because neither of them was ready to go home yet. It was the same now. James washed, William dried. The kitchen was warm and the November night was outside the window, pressing its cold against the glass. "She cooks the same things," William said. "She cooks the same everything," James said. He handed over a pan to dry. "She made that apple cake the first cold weekend of every November my entire life. She made it for my mother's birthday once, in November." "I remember," James said. "You were 12. She came over with the whole cake. I ate 3 pieces." "4," James said. "My mother counted." William looked at him. "She counted. She found it endearing." James looked at the window. "She always liked you. She still does." He handed over another pan. She's been glad I'm here this year. She told me last week. James, I'm glad the year worked out this way." He paused. "She didn't just mean for your father." William dried the pan. They finished the dishes and moved to the Aldrich living room, which had the same furniture it had always had. The plaid sofa, the upholstered chairs, the bookcase that Dennis had built in the 80s, and which held 3 decades of accumulation with the democratic hospitality of a well-used shelf. They sat, and James poured 2 glasses of bourbon from a bottle on the sideboard, and the house settled around them in the particular quiet of a late November evening. William looked at the room. "Do you remember the summer we were 16? He said. James looked at him. "We spent 3 weeks making a map," William said, "of every house on Sycamore Circle, every family, we included the dogs. We had a whole legend for the map." "I still have that map," James said. William looked at him. "It's in my old room, in a tube, in the closet." James held his bourbon glass. "I found it when I came back in July. I spent about 20 minutes with it." William thought about 16, the particular quality of 16, before everything became complicated, when the two of them had the entire summer and nowhere to be, and the street was a world sufficient to itself. The map had taken 3 weeks because they had been thorough, had walked every part of Sycamore Circle and documented it with the precision that James had always brought to things. The same precision that was now in a book about industrial towns. He had drawn it himself, in the neat architectural drafting he had taught himself from a book, with a legend and a compass rose, and the names of every family, every dog, every tree large enough to be worth noting. "What did you feel?" William said. "Looking at it?" James considered. "Like I was someone I had mostly stopped being," he said. "Not in a sad way. Just, the person who made that map was entirely in the present. He didn't have anything he was managing yet. He was just there, on this street, making a map of it because it seemed like a thing worth doing." "When did you stop being that person?" James looked at him. "When did you?" William thought about it. 18, maybe, he said. "When I started making plans to leave. When leaving became the plan." He paused. "I made leaving the project and everything else became material for the project." "Including what we were," James said. "Yes," William said, "including that." James set down his bourbon glass. He turned on the plaid sofa to face William more directly. The same reorientation, the physical turning toward what mattered. "Will," he said. "James," William said. "I'm going to say the thing now," James said. "Without being interrupted, I'm going to say the whole of it." "Okay," William said. "I have loved you," James said, "for as long as I can remember loving anything. I have loved you through 4 summers on this street and 7 years away from it and 4 months back on it. And I have managed and qualified and been afraid and told myself reasons and been careful and been a coward and been, at certain points, a fool." He said all of this with the specific directness of someone who has edited a sentence until it has nothing unnecessary in it. who has arrived at the essential. And I am done with all of that. Every bit of it. I am 33 years old and my father didn't know me for an hour yesterday, and life is... He stopped. His voice had moved slightly but held. Life is shorter than the things we keep putting off. William looked at him. James said. I want us. Whatever that looks like, whatever it requires. I want to figure out what the map of this looks like, going forward. He paused. He took a breath. He looked at William with the face that was both 33 and 12 and 22 and every age in between. The face of the person who was the axis of William's interior geography and had been since before he understood what that meant. I want to stop navigating around the best thing I know. The living room was very quiet. Outside, Sycamore Circle held its November silence. William set down his bourbon glass. He looked at James. This man he had known his whole life, who had made a map of their street at 16 with the precision of someone who believed the world was worth documenting carefully, who was writing a book about towns like this one because leaving them had not resolved them, who had sat on hospital steps and learned that his father didn't know him for an hour and had come home and sat on the steps of his childhood house in the dark because the house was the place where things were real. He thought about the truck on 81 South. He thought about the mile marker where he had thought turn around and kept driving. He thought about 7 years of a very good life in Philadelphia that had been good in every measurable way and had not resolved the one unmeasured thing. He thought, you were not wrong. He thought, you have never been wrong. He said, I am in love with you. Simple. Plain. Without the history lesson or the catalog of fears or the careful qualification. Just the sentence itself. The one that had been true on the street outside and in Philadelphia, and on 81 South and in the 7 years of the good unmeasured life. James looked at him. What happened in his face? William would not try to name it. Some things are not helped by naming. What happened in James Aldrich's face when he heard that sentence was something that had been held carefully for a long time and was now free. And it was not dramatic, and it was not small. It was the specific, quiet transformation of a person arriving somewhere they have been trying to get to for a very long time. James reached out and put his hand on William's face. William leaned into it. They sat in the Aldrich living room on the plaid sofa in the November night, in the house where James had grown up, on the street where both of them had grown up, which they had both sworn to leave and had left and had come back to for reasons they were no longer pretending were other than what they were. 4 summers, James said quietly, his hand on William's face. 4 summers, William said, and 7 years. Yes, that's a long time to carry something. Yes, William said. It is. James looked at him, close. Are you afraid? He said. Yes, William said. Are you? Yes, James said. I don't think it matters. No, William said. I don't think it does either. This is what November becomes, in time. It becomes 2 men on Sycamore Circle who stopped swearing they'd leave and started doing the harder, quieter work of staying. Not because staying was simple. It was not simple. William built his public interest practice slowly, and it was the work he had been made for, the work he had known he was for, and had not gotten to yet. James finished the book, taught his courses, made a case for a continuing appointment that the department eventually agreed to. Dennis Aldrich's recovery was slow and particular, the recovery of a man relearning the terms of his own life, and James was there for it. For the hard days and the small improvements, and the afternoon when his father looked at him and said, with the sudden clarity that sometimes came now, "You turned out good, James. I hope you know that." James told William that evening on the phone, quietly, and William listened the way James had taught him to listen, fully, without preparing his next sentence. And when James was done, William said he's right, and that was enough. The map, the one from the closet, the one from when they were 16, went up in James's office at the university. Not sentimentally, practically. It was, he maintained, genuinely good documentation of a specific street in a specific American town in the late 1980s, which was entirely relevant to his research. And the fact that it had been made by 2 16-year-olds with nothing better to do on a summer afternoon only made it more valuable, not less. William's mother stopped pretending she had not known exactly what she was doing when she called. Spring came to Dunmore the way spring always came to that part of Pennsylvania. Grudgingly, in fits, with false starts in March and actual starts in April. And by May, the maple in the front yard of the Garrett house was fully leafed, and the street had its warm weather quality again. The quality it had in the summers of their childhood when the days were long enough to hold everything. On an evening in May, they walked to Eldridge Lake. The lake was at its best in May, the water still cold from winter, incredibly clear. The trees along the bank in full new leaf, the particular light of the Pennsylvania spring long and golden and unhurried. They walked the gravel path, and the water was blue beside them and the birds were having strong opinions about the season. "I want to show you something," James said. He had the map. He had taken it out of its tube that morning and he held it now, slightly carefully, the way you hold something that is also 20 years old. He unrolled it at the picnic table by the water, the map of Sycamore Circle, made at 16. Every house, every family name, every dog with its name in small neat capitals, every tree. The compass rose in the upper right, the legend in the lower left. The two houses, the Garrett White Colonial and the Aldrich Yellow Craftsman, directly across from each other, as they were in life, each labeled with the family name and a notation that was, William saw now, the same for both. Best house on the street. He looked at James. "I didn't know you'd written that," William said. "I wrote it at the end," James said. "When we were done. You'd gone home." He looked at the map. "I put it away and didn't look at it for 20 years. And then I found it in July and I saw that and I thought—" He stopped. "What did you think?" James looked at him. "I thought," he said, "that some things you know from the beginning, and the only question is how long you make them wait." William looked at the map, at the two houses across from each other, at the notation in the same neat capitals, his best house on the street, written at 16 by a boy who knew something he wouldn't say for another 17 years. He looked at James. He said, "We're home." 3 words. The lake moved beside them. The new leaves turned in the May wind. Somewhere behind them, Dunmore, Pennsylvania, continued its particular American life. The streets and the houses and the families and the things carried and the things put down. The people who left and the ones who stayed and the ones who left and came back, which is its own kind of staying, which might be the best kind, because you have seen the other options. James folded the map with care. He looked at William across the picnic table, across the water, in the May light. He did not say anything. He did not need to. The lake said it. The map said it. The street said it. Had always said it, in the language of the first morning of every summer and the last evening of every fall, in the maple and the porch light and the sound of screen doors and the particular quality of a dead-end street that goes nowhere and is, because of this, exactly where everything is. James reached across the table. William took his hand. The May light lay on Eldridge Lake and on the hills above Dunmore, and on 2 men at a picnic table who had grown up on the same street and sworn they'd never come back and had come back and found, in the coming back, the thing that leaving had been caring for them all along. They stayed until the light was gone. Then they drove home. He put the map on the table between us, and I saw it before he could explain it. Both our houses, drawn in his careful 16-year-old hand, and under each one the same 4 words in small, neat capitals. He had written them alone, after I'd gone home. He had kept them for 17 years without saying a word. But the story begins earlier. That was the first thing. The green rectangle with the white lettering posted at the edge of Route 9 where the state highway narrowed and became Main Street. Dunmore, Pennsylvania. Population 3,847. The population number had been wrong for as long as either of them had been alive. Spray painted over twice, each time with a different number, each number eventually becoming wrong in a different direction. But the sign itself endured, sturdy and official, offering the town to the approaching traveler with the neutral authority of a fact that had decided not to have an opinion about itself.